Dan Pallotta, is that right?
That's right.
I have your book in front of me. As you can see, I haven't read any of it. I love it. Uncharitable, which is an interesting concept in itself that I hope we talk about. How restraints on nonprofits undermine their potential. And Dan, a couple of pages in, you say a couple of things that I absolutely believe are extraordinary and very, very challenging, and I think we need to really take a look at that. It is my hope that this book will give definition to a new cause, the challenge of transforming the very meaning of charity itself, and that will ignite a passionate movement inside and outside the sector on its behalf. More plainly put, I mean to create an uprising, a movement that questions all of what we've been taught, every rule, every constraint, every sacred cow, everything and anything that stands in the way of our ability to eliminate suffering and need. The nonprofit sector is being suffocated by a morality imposed from the outside, reinforced from within. It's based on methods instead of outcomes, and it's killing people. Those are fighting words, aren't they?
Yeah, they are.
Why did you write this book?
Well, picking up on what you just read, the word charity comes from the Greek for grace. And, to me, it ought to be about us having the grace to make other people's lives better, the grace to save lives, instead of looking at how low is that charity's overhead, or why did they pay that executive director that amount of money. That we ought to be looking at the big picture. Are we solving these social problems? What will it take to solve these social problems? And let's give it everything that it needs. To me, that's real grace.
We are taping a television program for McCuistion this coming week, and the title is going to be Philanthropy, the Business of Changing the World, with an emphasis on business. And I think I'm always curious about this, as I know others are. Is it truly possible for nonprofits to embrace a business model?
I don't think it's a problem of nonprofit organizations wanting or not wanting to embrace a business model. I think it's a problem of the culture not allowing them to embrace a business model. So there's been a popular admonition for the last 15 years. We want charities to act more like business, right? What we mean by that is we want to draw more blood from the stone. We want them to do even more for less. Well, that's the opposite of how businesses succeed. Apple didn't succeed by spending less researching the multi-touch screen for the iPhone and the iPad. So I take tremendous issue with this advice to charities, you should start acting more like business, because we are not for a moment ready to allow charities to act more like businesses. We get upset when they want to pay people the kind of money we pay in business. We get upset when they want to spend money on advertising the way Budweiser spends money on advertising. We get upset when they want to take the kinds of risks that the movie studios take every day on big, sometimes ridiculous movies like Sex and the City number 19 or whatever it is. And we don't let charity have a stock market. So please stop telling charities to act more like business when you won't give them permission to do that. It's abusive.
I think because of the Puritan ethic that colors the way we think about charity, and you talk about this history in your book, we have a tendency, and we're conditioned, to think of charities as having restraints, and that's part of your title. What are the restraints that you're talking about, and what can we do about them?
The restraints are economic. We don't want them to spend money on certain things, but those things we don't want them to spend money on are the very things that they need to grow. And if we want to solve social problems, they have to grow. We have to realize that we have to step back and look at these social problems. They are massive in scale, and we're not moving the needle on them. You look at the AIDS epidemic, and in 1992, 1.1 million adults and children died of AIDS in the world. Now, 20 years later, it's 1.8 million. The needle's moving in the wrong direction. Breast cancer deaths 20 years ago, 43,000 a year in the US. Today, about 40,000 a year. All right, the needle's moved a tiny little bit, but not in the way we had hoped. So these problems are huge, but our charities are tiny. They're no match for these problems, and unless they can grow, they're never going to be a match for these problems. And the only way they can grow is to spend money on the things that we typically have not wanted them to spend money on. The best leaders in the world, marketing and advertising to get their message out, to get more people to donate to them, taking risks on new ways of fundraising to the general public to raise more money. It all has to be about raising more money to grow, to provide more services, to solve these social problems. Now, if charity is just about, I want to feel good about my donation, and I want to know that 99% of it went to a homeless person and none of it went into the growth of your organization, well, then the system works fine as it is. If we want to keep things the same, then we have a perfectly fine system for doing that. If we don't want to solve these problems, the current system works great at not solving these problems. If we do want to solve these problems, we have to give charities more permission to take more risks and more chances and invest in themselves and really grow and flourish to meet the size of these needs.
All well and good, except when charities do, they're slapped, their hands are slapped, and we say all kinds of terrible things about them. And you know, one of the questions, and it may be a flawed one, but I think the question that we're conditioned to ask to evaluate a charity and the good they're doing is, before I write that check, what percentage of my donation goes to the actual cause?
Yeah.
That kind of stops things right there.
Yeah.
What should we be saying instead, and what should we be asking?
Well, let me talk first about why that's a bad question, right? What percentage of my donation goes to the cause versus overhead? First of all, it tells you nothing about the quality of the services that the charity is providing. So a soup kitchen can tell you 95 cents of your dollar goes to the cause, and you think, wow, that's a great charity, I'm going to give to them, and you'll never know that they serve rancid soup. Because that question didn't ask anything about the quality of the soup. You'll never know that they have an unfriendly staff. You'll never know that they're closed half the time, right? You'll never know any of the important things. Now, the other reason it's a bad question is the percentage that goes to the cause depends entirely on how the charity defines the cause. And the more broadly they define the cause, the more they say, well, we'll also call this, and this the cause, the higher the percentage they can tell you is going to the cause. So you donate to breast cancer research, and the charity tells you 90 cents of your dollar goes to the cause, and you think that means research. But they've defined education and their pamphlets and their events as part of the cause as well. Now, charities do this on an epidemic scale because they know you want a high percentage of the money going to the cause, so they alter their accounting to shift expenses so that large portions of money appear to be going to the cause, and this happens with the most popular, reputable charities in America. So it's a deeply flawed question.
So in other words, there are things that nonprofits might be doing, and perhaps inadvertently, that in essence are not as truthful about the way they're conducting the business.
Sometimes it's not so inadvertent, sometimes it's quite deliberate. And it may not be illegal, but it may be duplicitous. If you know that your donor to your, let's say, breast cancer cause thinks that when you talk about the cause, you mean research, but that's not what you mean, and you don't tell them, even though what you're doing may be legal from an accounting perspective, I don't think it's a good faith conversation with the donor.
I think we're dealing with some real fundamental issues here. And so I wanted to ask, because you say, what if the fundamental basis of the system itself is the problem?
Yeah.
What do you really mean by that statement?
What if we don't need a different philosophy for helping people as we have for selling soda and shoes and sneakers? What if we don't need a deprivation mentality for the nonprofit sector? Now, we need a sector to provide homes for the homeless and to try to find a cure for breast cancer. But what if we don't need a separate set of rules by which that sector should operate. And I don't think we do. I think it's completely artificial. I think the notion that someone who can end breast cancer should get paid less than someone who creates the iPhone is ridiculous.
We're talking apples to oranges here. I did not mean that tongue-in-cheek. Because the furor over paying nonprofit people as a CEO or in any kind of leadership position or anywhere in the organization would be immense. We don't pay nonprofit people the same compensation we do in the for-profit world.
Right.
What has to change there and why?
Well, we have to educate people, and I'm not saying let's just go elevate the salaries in the nonprofit sector and everyone will get more effective and smarter. No, no, no. I'm saying stop preventing charities from using money to steal talent, great talent, away from the for-profit sector and elsewhere. Stop putting that brake on the system, because what you're doing is preventing the sector from being able to attract some of the leaders who could actually make huge progress on these problems.
One of the things that you've mentioned often in your book and in your other work and in your blogs, like the Harvard Business Review
Right.
blog, is something that I think we need to pay attention to, and that is this being undercapitalized. So literally, some nonprofits can barely function. They are working with equipment that's outdated,
Right.
with people who may not be trained to do the work they need to do to change the world.
Right.
And that's what we're all about, right?
Yeah, the best example is the nonprofit overhead cost study looked at a suicide prevention hotline that essentially had, donated telecommunications equipment so that people got busy signals when they were ready to commit suicide. All in the name of charity, all in the name of frugality, all in the name of this ethic that we uphold so high. Buy a damned new telecommunication system so that the phone gets answered when someone's about to commit suicide.
That's sad. That's
Yeah.
sad. That's not the way we need to be running business. The starvation cycle that I know that you're familiar with, Ann Coggins Gregory, Don Howard, they term the way we do business, the business of begging, so to speak, the starvation cycle. How do we cut through that once and for all?
Yeah, well, the starvation cycle says that nonprofit organizations don't have enough resources to work with. They don't tell funders that they need any more money to work with, or funders ask them to continue to do the work with the level of funding they have, so that that cycle essentially repeats itself. How do we change that? Start speaking up. Start telling funders and donors, I cannot execute on that grant with that amount of overhead. I need a higher rate of overhead because you're forcing me to steal resources from other parts of the organization in order to execute on your grant. We have to stop telling people what they want to hear and start telling them what they need to hear.
Tall order. I hope it can be done. With all of the cuts to social
Well, I'm sorry, but not such a tall order, right? What we're talking about is tell the truth. It's the standard we hold our children to.
Why are we afraid to tell the truth?
Well, economic security issues, we're afraid that we won't get the grant, if we say we need more overhead. But that's the cycle. We just cement our own fates by making everyone believe we can operate on the amount of money that we have operated on, because we always have. So we can't grow.
So this is juggling in the most effective way, because this is about educating the nonprofit leader, the people who work in nonprofits,
Yeah.
as well as educating the public itself,
Yeah.
and the people who are giving the donations.
Yeah, it's very ingrained. I was talking to someone the other day who runs a nonprofit cancer foundation, and I was saying that this system is ridiculous, it works against us. And she said, I totally agree. And in the same breath, she said, 88% of all of the money we get goes directly to the cause. Well, you didn't hear a word I just said, because it's that standard, that holy grail that we put on a pedestal, that we put on an altar, that's what's got to go. But people are so used to using it that they can't even hear that there's a fundamental problem with it.
Dan, we've been operating that way for hundreds of years.
Yeah, absolutely.
And yet, Americans are the most charitable people on the face of the planet.
Yeah.
So we're doing some things right.
Right.
What about little tweaks?
Well, little tweaks will get us little progress. I'm all for transformation, and I think the American people are ready for transformation. The American people don't want to be donating all of this money every year to no end. The American people want problems to get solved. All we need to do is start to teach them how to use that money and more of it more effectively to actually solving problems instead of spending it on Band-Aids all the time. The American people are not stupid. I give this talk, a 45-minute talk on the book, to lots of audiences, lay audiences, and in 45 minutes they get it. And they don't want to ask that question about percentages anymore. They want to ask questions about how we solve problems, but no one has ever told them to do it.
So, as a nonprofit executive myself, and others in the nonprofit world, we need to step up to the plate.
Absolutely.
Tell us precisely what we should be saying to the public and our donors.
Well, it's more than a matter of what you should be saying. It's by what process should we be communicating with the general public. Let's develop a whole curriculum and what are all of the things we need to say. But if you wanted to summarize it, the question that you're asking about percentages doesn't serve you. It's not giving you the answer you think it does, and it's not serving the cause you care about so much. You give money to this cause because you love the people affected by it and you want to stop their suffering. Asking about overhead is continuing their suffering. Let me tell you why. Now you get their attention.
And next?
Well, let me tell you why. Number one, because you don't know if the soup is rancid or not, right? All of the things that I just said. You don't know what the cause actually is. You don't know if the charity is being actually effective. And you don't know. We think of that overhead percentage as a proxy for efficiency. So someone says 95 cents of your donation goes to the cause, and we think, wow, they don't waste any money. 95 cents goes to the cause. You don't know that they don't waste any money. How do you know they're not wasting the 95 cents they spend on the cause? That's where all the money's going. That's where the greatest opportunity to waste your money is. So, and some people say, well, we should still ask it because it's the only question we have to ask. Well, that's like saying I'm going to take my kid's thermometer temperature with a broken thermometer because it's the only thermometer I have in the house. Better not to take the kid's temperature with it. You might kill them.
A lot of new thinking. With the cuts to social welfare, we have even more pressure because charities have to take up the slack. And so that means that even more solutions are needed. There are new models, and one of them that a lot of people talk about as one of the answers is social enterprise. How do you see the future of social enterprise and its importance to the sustainability of nonprofits?
I think it's two separate questions. I think social enterprise is important, but I think there are some problems for which the purely profit motive can't apply. There are some problems whereby you need philanthropy, you need people to contribute their money without any hope of economic return, like, as I mentioned earlier this morning, a program for abused women, or that you can't monetize them improving their self-esteem, or a program to mentor teenage gang members. Those results might not show up for 15 years. You can't monetize that. So there are some things for which philanthropy is going to be the only answer. And so my passion is liberating the nonprofit sector so that it gets the resources it needs to help those kids and help those women.
I admire and respect your passion because we need it.
Thank you.
Keep talking, keep talking. If there was anything else that you wanted, both the public, people who are philanthropic, which is really just about everybody, and the nonprofit leaders, what last words would you say?
Stop asking about overhead percentages and start giving your money literally to the fundraising operations of the organizations you love, because they can multiply your money. What would you rather, give $1 and have it buy $1's worth of soup, or give $1 into the fundraising department and have them multiply it into $8 for soup? The very thing you've been taught not to give to is the thing you should give to most.
Thank you.
Thank you.